The first order of business, or the second order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to which it stands, watch that, God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. Well, at least it wasn't the national anthem. Okay, so we're going to get going with new business. The first and only on the agenda for this evening is HARB 2018-02, 303 South Wayne Avenue. There's a request for a new roof to the front of the house over the porch in the house, and an optional two-car garage to the back of the home. And perhaps while you're going through, you can explain to us why it's listed as optional.
Oh.
There you go.
All right, so the garage is listed as optional because the owner is going to be selling the house, and so if the new owner gets on board now, then they have the option to buy the garage. But for now, we're not building it, but we're afraid of them buying it in the next couple of weeks and then wanting it. So right now, the existing garage is right here. The existing garage is, I think, is that good enough? Okay. So the existing garage is just a one-story, one-car garage, and there's an existing mature tree next to it. So instead of just expanding it within the same footprint, just expanding out into the side yard, we're proposing to move it a little bit closer to the street. And then here are some of the houses, some of the neighbors' houses. Mostly I chose these photos, because they showed examples of the standing seam metal roof, which is what we're proposing for the front porch of our house. So this is the house directly across the street, which has a standing seam metal roof. And this is a house a couple doors down. So this is the front elevation of the house that faces South Wayne. Right now it has an asphalt shingle roof. It's in bad shape. And it has these two bays, one here on the front and one that's on the side. And they both have kind of a standing seam tin roof, which is what we think is original to the house. So we basically just want to recreate that look on the front of the house as kind of an accent at the porch. And I'll get back to the garage in just a minute. So side elevations. So basically, we feel it's a pretty minor change and will improve the look from the existing asphalt shingle roof. So here is the existing roof as you would see it today. And then here's that little bay that's existing that has a very shallow standing seam metal roof on it. So we'd like to bump it up just about 8 inches or so, just so you can see the play between the new porch roof and the existing bay. And then this is the bay at the side that has that same standing seam roof. So this is the proposed look. And then as for the garage, basically we wanted to kind of mimic what's going on in the main house instead of having this more shallow slope roof and these, the doors, which are, cute little doors, but we wanted to be able to possibly, use it as a workspace, like wood shop type of thing. So we wanted to get a little bit more light in there. So this would be the front elevation facing the street. And then, kind of your standard carriage style doors. And then windows on the side elevation and on the rear elevation, and then just a man door on the side. And then here is a photo of the existing garage back there. As you can see, it's set really far back from the street. I think it's 200, 300 feet. 280 feet from the street. So it's, it's fairly well set back, and then it's up and back behind some trees. So we think it would be a nice addition to the house.
So they're selling the house, and I understand you probably don't know all the details or communications. Do you happen to know if they had discussed or reviewed these particular plans with the buyers?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
They don't have buyers on board yet.
Got it. They simply want to be able to market it
Yes.
with the fact that it's already been through HARB, and they have the approval that if someone wanted to.
Exactly.
Okay. Which, just to go on record, is a dangerous game to play, right? Because the new owners, the fact that we don't have an educational component to, to kind of welcoming people into the historic districts, it ends up being a somewhat dangerous game to play to say, oh yeah, you're approved to do this, without the person truly understanding, okay, well, you're approved to
Right.
do this, specific design.
Right.
And here's the reason why. So there's part of me that feels slightly uncomfortable with this, with the idea of putting it in there.
Right.
From a professional standpoint, I totally understand. And absolutely, I would say it's smart thinking on the part of the sellers and their realtor. But it does concern me.
Mm-hmm.
Because that could be misinterpreted.
Right.
Yeah. Do you guys have comments, or do you want me to kind of start questioning?
Sure.
What is it? Oh, you mean I hit it too many times?
Yes.
Right. What is the age of the house?
I believe it's 1890s.
Okay, so
That's correct.
shall we say pre-auto, for want of a better word? Pre-automobile. I
Yes.
was looking at the design. Are you moving the garage up or expanding it?
We're moving it up and expanding it to be a two-car garage. Because the existing garage is right up next to a mature tree, we'd like to be able to keep that tree and then move the garage, and that
I
would
was
make us
going
have
to
to move the
suggest
garage
your
forward.
issue might be with the Shade Commission.
Right, no, we're keeping the tree. As far as I know, we're keeping the tree.
I would like to ask Greg if he has any thoughts.
Well, let's get to the public comments for that.
I'm
Sorry,
sorry.
I'm sorry, Greg. Hang out for a sec. We certainly will, and Greg, thank you for coming. I don't mean to put you off. Bob, do you want to ask questions? You look like you've got a few cards there.
Yes. Just a general comment on metal roofs. Not too long ago, I toured a house that was for sale in Narberth, and this house was exceptionally done by a man who has an autistic child. And the house was also used by autistic children coming from the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, CHOP. And it was done so well because things like sharp edges were taken off. It was very airy, very light. But what impressed me the most is he put in a whole new metal roof on top of that house. And it was magnificent. So I also asked him, it was metal roof, and he said, yeah, and the reason being is because my child, when it rains, he hears the tap, tap, tap on the metal roof, and that helps for the autistic child to get more acclimated to their physical environment. And I thought that was an interesting insight. So when I saw your plans with the various parts of the metal roofs here and there, I thought I would at least share that, and maybe it would have the same effect for this potential house buyers over time.
Yeah.
I thought I would just like to to mention that. I never thought about it that way, but I thought it really made sense to me when this man explained what he did for
Yeah,
these children.
thanks for sharing that.
So from the design standpoint of the garage, and I will say, personally, I don't have any issue with the, with the metal roof. From a material standpoint, we can't comment. From a design standpoint, it's already in use on the house, and from what we've seen from period photos, it's not out of place. For the garage, however, I'm struggling to see where you've picked up visual cues from the house, knowing that, yes, it was pre-automobile, and the garage that's standing there, I'm not sure, is it original? Do you know?
I'm actually not sure about that.
Okay. So, so we don't know if there was a structure that was on the premises or not before. And we're looking at this, and we're looking at the garage design, and I try to think to myself, well, if the architect was in the same situation and automobiles just in some science fiction kind of way happened to be around at that time period, does this seem logical in terms of the design that they would come up with for the house? So when I was going by the house, I was looking specifically for dormers,
Okay.
and I did not see any. And perhaps I'm mistaken, but I'm trying to find where these visual cues have been kind of borrowed from.
Yeah, so there's the two neighboring houses both have that same type of shed dormer, and they're both built around the same era. You can see kind of the same porch structure, but they both have shed dormers on the sides.
Okay. Although the
Yeah, so there's one on this house here, and then this house here has two shed dormers stacked up. And so you can see kind of how this, the front of the house kind of mimics the same, it's the same style as our house.
In my opinion, if you have to have shed dormers, I would like to see them on the sides, and you have done that. Also, too, one observation that I took away from touring that area on foot was that the vast majority of the surrounding houses have that, looks like slate or asphalt shingles for the major portions
Right.
of their roofs. So I'm assuming now, again, with the main roof area, you're keeping that? You're not
It'll be replaced as the asphalt shingle roof.
with asphalt shingles? Okay, so it's the entire rooftop that will be asphalt shingles?
Right, and
Okay.
then there's just the bay windows, the porch, and then there's a little box out at the rear of the house for a breakfast bay in the kitchen that will have the same metal roof.
Okay. Just to get back to Miles' question, if this would be proposed to, a potential homeowner that is not, there yet, it's not in the process of, someone that's already bought it, I wonder if a continuance here would be appropriate.
What I was thinking was, and perhaps in a way to help and Greg, we definitely want to hear from you, but just kind of thinking among the three of us up here, if we were to do something, and you'll have to let us know if this is all right, to have a condition that the new homeowner needs to come before HARB to either confirm that they are using the design that happens to be approved or submitting a new one. Do you know if that's yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah, because I think that if we are able to have a win-win here, it's being able to, be somewhat generous to the homeowners and assist them in selling their home by being able to then, advertise the fact that they have this and that they've reviewed it before HARB, but that the new homeowners would simply need to confirm the design or resubmit. And I think that, that, in my opinion, that would be kind of a fair compromise. I don't know how you guys feel about it. I'm not putting forth any type of motion yet, but just, voicing kind of an internal monologue.
My thought is that this should be part of a seller's disclosure and not part of our, rulemaking. Sorry. I think this should be not part of our legislation, so to speak, but part of our, a seller's disclosure. Believe me, people can be strung up plenty high on a seller's disclosure alone.
And the owner is very sensitive to the historical context and design, so, I think it's reasonable to ask that, they disclose what's been approved by the board. And
Okay, another question for the township. So when the proceedings are finished, is a letter sent to the homeowner to confirm that? Okay, all right. Want to make sure they're not relying on going on YouTube in order to be able to come back and figure out what was decided. All right, good. Do you guys have any more comments? Otherwise, perhaps we hear from Greg.
Just two more quick comments. The roof heights on the main roof area is going to stay the same with your
Yes.
plan? Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
And-
This is all existing right now.
Okay, and the roof lines will stay the same? Okay, okay, thank you.
All right, public comments? Greg, come on down.
Good evening, everyone. Greg Pritchard, I live in Wayne, and first of all, it's a great house. I went through it when there was an estate sale there about 2 years ago, and it was designed by Boyd and Boyd. They were two brothers. They're briefly in partnership. They designed the Central Baptist Church together. The one brother designed Wayne Hotel and Saturday Club, and he's much more well known than his brother. But so it's a wonderful house. I don't have any issue really with the garage. So my question, maybe it's a procedural question, is about the porch roof and why it was on the agenda if the only change is in material and not in design. So
Well, Greg, I suppose then I couldn't have brought up my metal roof shtick.
Well, yeah, because if we are going to start talking about materials, then there are potentially a lot more things to discuss, and I'll speak to that a little more later. But I think if that is something to discuss, the metal roof, and I've seen metal roofs come onto porch roofs a bit in the two out of three historic districts, and I don't think it was authentic to this particular house. It may have been used elsewhere, but I don't think it was used here. But since it's not something that we discuss here, I'll leave it at that. Okay, thanks.
So typically what ends up happening is that, we do not have it within our ordinance to comment on materials used or colors and some of the things that other local townships have within their HARB ordinances. From a design and aesthetic standpoint, however, there's a very different look for a standing seam versus shingle. And the current HARB ordinance is loose enough that if we really wanted to interpret it that way, and there was such a characteristic change in the kind of the historic preservation or nature of the property because of a change like that, then certainly I think that it would be within our purview to discuss it. But why this was put on the agenda, I would assume that it was probably a combination of that along with the fact that there is the garage proposed. Any comments from the township before we go on? No? Any additional comments or thoughts? Anyone like to propose a motion?
Okay. Now, we can go and motion to approve this, and it would go into the disclosure agreement.
So, okay.
just wanna make sure I'm
no,
clear with
that's
that.
okay, because, so now we're getting into kind of real estate procedure. And Terry, maybe you remember, I don't recall any section of the seller's disclosure, one of the par forms, that states anything about an approval in order to do work in the future. You can certainly add in additional information to it if you'd like in the seller's disclosure.
Fall into the section that has to do with, are there any outstanding certificates that haven't been, like, almost under the use and occupancy clause, where you're putting, is there anything outstanding on this?
Yeah,
property?
which also would be inspections, right? Closing out any permits. I don't know. I don't think it's enforceable to do it that way. I think that we simply need to make sure that that when permits are pulled, that the new homeowner receives a copy of whatever motion is passed. And as far as what we can do, we can make a motion in order to be able to recommend a certificate of appropriateness, or certificate of appropriateness with conditions, or a certificate of appropriateness with recommendations. And that's,
What recommendations are you making?
well, I'm happy to make a motion. So I propose that we provide a recommendation for a certificate of appropriateness with the condition that that the new owner, should they decide to build the garage, needs to either confirm to HARB that they're moving forward with the proposed design that we see here, or they have to resubmit a new design and begin the process from the beginning.
And that's okay with the township?
I'll have to check. Check with Kevin.
Okay. Yeah, great.
I think normally if you're approving of something that was submitted and the new property owner submits something that's different from that, the township would send it back to you. And but if they decide to proceed with this, then they would be good to go. So I don't see any reason not to approve as submitted. But it's up to you.
I motion to issue a certificate of appropriateness
A second?
with a recommendation for a certificate of appropriateness.
A second.
As submitted?
As submitted.
Okay. All those in favor? All right, the motion passes. Thank you very much. Okay. Back to our agenda. So the next item on the agenda is old business, the report on the New Harb ordinance. So was able to hear from Beverly, the county, yesterday, finally, who was able to provide me with a few examples on some of the languages that we'd like to use. And those specifically had to do with scattered sites, as well as demolition. And, there were a few other kind of loose ends and questions that I had asked about wording and how should certain things be phrased. So I started going through the different ordinances yesterday. I started pulling them into a document today, but, and I've incorporated, I think, Bob, all of your comments. Janelle's are a bit trickier because she has a lot of kind of comments, but not revisions that she's provided. And so I sent her an email asking if she and I could and I think you guys were on the email, that, could we get together? Obviously, it would only be the two of us, so that we wouldn't ruffle any feathers with the Sunshine Act, and I can kind of get a better sense of what she was trying to accomplish through some of the comments that she made. As soon as I'm able to sit down with her, I don't see any reason why we wouldn't be able to then move forward and at least review this. And Greg, we'd love for you to be able to, to take a look at it as well as additional members of the township, additional members of the township's citizens, and eventually put this forward to the Board of Commissioners.
So Miles, just one comment. You've incorporated all of our suggestions into that one document so far?
Yeah, I haven't distributed it because I was
Okay.
pulling Beverly's in as well.
All right.
And there were a couple different versions I was going back and forth with, so it took a little bit, and then trying to figure out, well, does that have a conflict with anything else that we have stated in there? And if so, what should stand, what shouldn't? So there is a little bit of an iterative process on my kitchen table, sitting down and kind of going through all of these. But I think that I've got a good grasp on those. I just, want to hear from Janelle. And obviously, we haven't heard from Sarah in a little while. And, and I'd like to get her feedback and at least, back in. If she wants to kind of take the helm again on this, I'm fine with that.
I'll be happy to help you. I had a secret life as a researcher and a writer, so I can edit.
Exciting, and thank you. If that's it, then
I just wanted to make
public,
one observation
Yeah.
on the new HARB ordinance. As I thought about this a little more, the community notification really works for me. I thought that was really well written. Maybe we could fine tune it a little bit more, but again, in my opinion, if I just got that, everything else for me would be gravy. But beyond that, in my opinion, when I looked at other HARB ordinances, months ago and all that kind of thing, I think, again, the really beautiful thing about the Radnor HARB ordinance is that it is broad, and it's kind of like a middle way, because and you probably are seeing this now, Miles, with your own research, with the HARB ordinances that Beverly forwarded to you. I saw all kinds of things, from very restrictive, very narrow, to more broader, or to even those that aren't even ordinances, are non-enforceable. They're just community groups. They're totally volunteer, and it might be, say, for example, a retirement community, and you want to do something with your house. Well, you go before us, and we give you suggestions. There's no enforceability at all. But what I feel, again, going forward, in my opinion, after going through all that and thinking about it, is we still keep the ordinance broad, but get it a little bit more narrower. I don't think that a very narrow HARB ordinance such as Nantucket is really going to work here for Radnor. But again, my opinion is, the ordinance is broad. I've learned to really appreciate that in a lot of ways in what we do, because it gives us flexibility on how we can approach things. But then number two, just to get a little bit more narrower in things. Demolition by neglect, I think of the whole question of that negative massing. Again, just two issues, and then also scattered sites and what we want to do about that. I think for scattered sites, in my opinion, that's going to have to be a question of education. Educating in some way the community on what we do, and if there is interest from other community members, especially who live in those potential new historic districts, whether or not they would want that. So again, just a few of my observations and comments as we've been going through this. And again, I wanted to say thank you to Miles, and also to Sarah for all that wonderful groundwork that you did. It's much appreciated.
Thank you. And I agree with you. It's really amazing how restrictive some other townships happen to be. And a lot of them also place quite a burden on the homeowner in situations such as demolition by neglect. In one local township, I believe the 9 or 10 items that they need to put together in order to be able to get approval for demolition, removal, or relocation, whether it's because of neglect or any other reason, is that they include getting an appraisal done, or so a real estate appraisal done that shows the difference in the value of the property before and after. And, it's a few $100s on top of the fee simply to submit the plans to their HARB. And then there were a whole bunch of others, including one that said that, someone who wants to get approval for demolition because of neglect needs to submit the MLS listing sheets, the proof that they've been trying to sell their house for at least 3 years, which I thought was a very interesting solution. Yet at the same time, I personally, my feeling was it doesn't quite have a fit, here in Radnor. I don't think that that's really the nature of what we're going for. However, if other members of the board felt like that was something that should be included in there, that would certainly be a topic of discussion. But Bob, back to your point, I think that having more concrete terms for specific topics is important without going overboard and and shifting the balance so far away from homeowner rights that HARB ends up becoming something that people end up trying to avoid. We are here to help. And I thoroughly enjoy the fact that as a board we've kind of congealed around this idea that we can come and we can have a dialogue with the people who are presenting before us.
I still think we need to incorporate some kind of follow-up. And if ever we didn't learn that with North Wayne Avenue, we never learned anything.
Yeah, absolutely. All right.
One thing on the North Wayne Avenue case. I know that, I look back at that case, there was some exterior deterioration, right? And that's what we focus on, right? We focus on the exterior of the house, right? But it also seemed to me that there must have been a lot of interior deterioration, probably more so than the exterior. The deterioration on the inside was probably, I'm just assuming, much worse than anything that I saw from the outside, considering. Now, my question is, if we focus on the exterior of the house, right, and deterioration thereof through demolition by neglect, say, for example, I don't know, walls falling in, et cetera, roofs not maintained, I get that. But what about if it's an interior issue?
So the Haverford Township HARB ordinance includes a requirement for a letter from a licensed structural engineer to speak to the structural integrity of the house, of the property. And then on top of that, they also require a letter from the township code enforcement. So I think that you kind of have this kind of, one township, the local municipality weighing in on it. Second, a licensed professional who specifically has knowledge in their field, being able to provide testimony as far as whether the property truly needs to be torn down. Okay.
I don't have to vote, but
I motion to adjourn.
Well, we have a couple other items on the agenda first. One other item, but then we'll table that motion for just a few more moments. Public participation, Greg?
All right, thanks very much again. Regarding the demolition question, one thing we do in Lower Merion, if someone is proposing the demolition of an historic resource, they are required to submit an historic resource impact study to the Harbor Historical Commission for their review. This is a document prepared by a knowledgeable consultant, historic preservation consultant. It includes elements such as a narrative history of the property, a structural analysis, a survey, interior photos, and things like that, and also mitigation measures. If the building has to be demolished, here are the things that can be put on the table as mitigation for that loss. So it could be salvage of materials, some integration of part of the building into the new construction, or something to that effect. But it's something that's, I think, very effective, and it helps educate the review board to really understand what it is they're voting on. So that might be something you want to consider as well.
I like that. I've seen that in a couple different townships where they've had the method of disposal, and they talk about what happens to the materials, where do the materials go?
Right.
And there certainly could be a second home for them.
Salvage and documentation are usually the two big ones.
Yeah.
Greg, a question. As far as that process, what does it cost for the homeowner to do that?
I really
Can you give
don't
us a
know.
ballpark figure?
I've never been on that end of
Okay.
the process, so I can't say. But we prepare a list. We have a list of qualified consultants that we hand out if people ask, and it's something that I can provide you with samples of those kind of documents if you'd like to see them. So
Sure.
That would be
anything that's-
wonderful. Please do that.
Yeah.
sure.
Anything that's public record.
Well, I also wanted to comment, and sorry for typing this up, I didn't want to miss anything, but I recently gave a walking tour of North Wayne to a group of people from Rose Valley, which is just south of Media. And Rose Valley was developed by William Price, who also designed most of the homes in the North and South Wayne historic districts. He's kind of a legendary figure in architecture. Some of his earliest commissions include the homes that you were charged with protecting, and his career ended with the designs of the great Atlantic City Boardwalk hotels. So he's a big deal. Seeing our neighborhood through their eyes really reminded me as to how special Wayne is and what it means to be stewards of these extraordinary historic resources in a broader context. The people from Rose Valley are actually preparing a very special program on Price's work, which I'll let you know more about when it's been scheduled. And they have a great new museum down in Rose Valley. They just opened a couple months ago. It's really extraordinary. Now, regarding the rewriting of the ordinance, I'd like to talk specifically about the importance of materials. What you're tasked with is the preservation of the appearance of contributing structures from the public right-of-way. With the exception of ornamental features, stone foundations, stucco elements, etc., I would guess about 85% of a building's visible surface is covered in materials that are regularly replaced. And I'm speaking mostly of siding and windows. Regarding siding, with a few small exceptions, all houses in North Wayne, for example, were originally clad in cedar shingles. While some modern-day replacements have used actual cedar shingles as the replacement materials, there are modern material alternatives that replicate the appearance of cedar shingles and are appropriate under most HARB standards. But what we're seeing more of in North Wayne is taller, hardy plank style siding that's more of a clapboard type surface with unbroken horizontal lengths. And really there's no historic precedent for that sort of siding, and it really stands out and doesn't look right on the block. Now, as for windows, I've mentioned before that vinyl windows are a detriment to any historic building. You'd be hard-pressed to find another HARB that finds vinyl windows an acceptable replacement. if original wood windows cannot be repaired, there are replacement options that don't detract from the general appearance of an historic facade. And in fact, I've noticed that many North Wayne residents do use aluminum-clad windows with simulated or true divided lights that do a good job of replicating the original windows and will last a long time, too. But not everyone does that. In fact, I just noticed one home in particular whose original wood windows were very recently replaced with vinyl with Munson grid patterns that are wildly different from the originals. And they really detract from the character of the house, which is really one of the most unique on its block. The only ray of hope that I've seen is that these windows are bound to fail in about 15 years, at which point I hope the owners opt for something more in keeping with the character of the block and the district. So thank you for your hard work to improve the hard process. I know how much time you're spending, or I can guess how much time you're spending, and your dedication's appreciated. And I hope you can begin to take these kinds of details into account going ahead as well. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. All right, Bob?
I motion to adjourn. Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor? All right.